equivalent to EN 9100. To ship any parts to aerospace defense customers, we need to have AS 9100D certification. We also ship many parts to automobiles and various other industries. Many of you may be familiar, like AS 9100 or ISO. They talk nothing much about type of industry you are in. So how we basically deal with those sort of things. So several other industry verticals have come up with their own certification processes. We will talk about some of them and where we stand with respect to those. We have Lloyd Register certification. As you know, LR is an age-old name in oil and gas industries, and their certifications in additive manufacturing is important in the sense this was the first certification where they went through our design and development controls, then additive manufacturing process controls, then build control, what type of powders we use, how we handle the powders. So it was more additive manufacturing specific audit. Post that, we have got certification from them. This is the reason behind some of the oil and gas certification, oil and gas customers from Europe and USA show interest in Wipro 3D. And without these sort of certifications, getting orders from them would be really difficult. We also have Honeywell certification. We had an audit by Honeywell. So Honeywell have their own certification process, which they call as Approved Process Sourcing List or APSL. They will do in detail audit very much similar to LR, but more stringent, more detailed. They look more into how we manage the powder, how powder quality is ensured, how we control the build, how build quality is ensured. So these are the striking different from standard processes, as these fall under special processes. So all OEM customers conduct their own special process audits in line with NADCAP audit checklist. If a supplier is approved by NADCAP, then they approve them directly. If they are not approved by NADCAP and they are going to perform any special processes, then they do their own internal audit as per NADCAP audit checklist, and they provide certification. So because we were going to do 3D printing of parts for Honeywell, and we don't have a NADCAP, so Honeywell has conducted an audit and has given the certification. So these are the different certifications related to different industries. Let us assume you are an automobile industry supplier. Then you need to have TS 16949 certification. So TS 16949 certification is very much similar to ISO plus the special requirements of automobile industry. If you are a aerospace or space or defense supplier who is shipping the parts to customers, then you need to have AS 9100D or EN 9100D, which both are equivalent. So this is ISO plus additional requirements related to aerospace and space industry. If you are performing special processes for aerospace, space or defense, you need AS 9100D as well as NADCAP certification. We will discuss more about NADCAP in further slides. Then if you are a medical, if you are supplying to medical industry customers, then you need to have ISO 13485 certification. If you are doing special process for oil and gas customers, then you need Lloyd Register certification. So these are the different type of certifications related to different industries. So International Aerospace Quality Group. This is the certifying body which establishes all the aerospace standards. Let us say, for example, this was basically formed by AAAG, which is American Aerospace Quality Group, EAQG, Europe Aerospace Quality Group, and APAQG, Asia Pacific Aerospace Quality Group. So all these three quality groups together has formed this IAQG Council. So all the AS standards like AS 9100D, AS 13002, AS 13003. So all these different AS standards are released by this IAQG Council. Say there is a standard called 9100. If we got certification from AAQG, the certification will be named as AS9100. If we got certification from EAQG, the certification will be as EN9100. If we got from APAQG, it will be KS9100, which is Korean standard, or JISQ9100, which is Japanese industrial standard. So the requirements are same, only the certifying body would be differing. So all these are equivalent standards. Then comes AIAG. So in automobile industry, AIAG was basically formed by Big Three way back around in 1980s. So Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors. These three together realized that as they need to produce like in a day thousands of parts, doing 100% inspection was not possible to them, because they need to identify a way where they can get away with doing sampling inspection. So these three have started AIAG, and they released several standards like APQP manual, PPAP manual, FMEA manual, then MSA manual, SPC manual. So all these different standards they have released various which are more suitable to automobile series production. So currently several other companies have joined AIAG Council. PRA is the main certifying body for NADCAP. So NADCAP stands for National Aerospace and Defense Contractors Aggregation Program. So PRA is main certifying body for NADCAP, and this is a not-for-profit organization affiliated by SAE, Society of Automotive Engineering. Generally, OEM customers ask for AS9100D certification or equivalent for conventional machining suppliers, and for special process suppliers, you need to have NADCAP certification. Just if you are wondering what are these special processes? So any process which modifies or changes the inherent physical, chemical, electrical, or metallurgical properties of a particular item, or non-conventional methods which remove or deposit a material on an item during or after fabrication, which cannot be evaluated by non-destructive means, or those used to maintain process controls such as non-destructive testing. So in our case, which is 3D printing or additive manufacturing, these two clauses are applicable for us because we do modify the physical, chemical, and metallurgical properties of an item. And in this, we deposit the material on the item which cannot be evaluated by non-destructive means. So without doing tensile test or some other test, you cannot say that my part meets the different requirements, right? So by non-destructive means, we cannot say that our part meets the requirement. So in special processes, what they suggest is identify all the inputs which affect the output. So have a control on all the inputs. So if you are controlling the inputs, automatically we will have a control on output. So identify all the inputs, establish controls like upper limit and lower limit for all the inputs, control them so that you will have control on the output. So these are the different special processes. All the non-destructive testings comes under special process, like radiography, fluorescent penetrant inspection, or magnetic particle inspection. So all NDT comes under special processes. Welding, all fusion welding, diffusion welding, laser welding, all these come under special processes. All chemical processing, like chemical milling, all these come under special processes. All heat treatment, like solution treatment, stress relieving, aging, all these come under special processes. All coatings like primer, chemical conversion coating, anodizing. So all these come under special processes. So one thing that we need to remember here is the terminology of special process may vary from customer to customer. Say for example, a few customers may say CMM is not a special process for me. So I know OEM customers like Boeing who consider CMM as a special process. So there is a NADCAP certification for CMM as well. So the definition of special process may vary from customer to customer. So customers may say material testing is not a special process. Few more customers may say material testing is a special process. So it may vary from customer to customer. So in our case, additive manufacturing falls under welding. So it is a special, considered as a special process. If you look at AS9100D, it is very much generic standard, whereas NADCAP is very much specific to a process. Say, for example, if we say NADCAP, we have a NADCAP separately for EBM, we have NADCAP separate for fusion welding, we have NADCAP separately for diffusion welding, we have NADCAP separately for laser welding. So it is very much specific to a process. So with this, this is the end of related to certifications. If you have any questions or queries related to certifications, you can ask now. If you have any queries related to certifications, you can ask now. Okay, so I think we can go to the next slide. So I will be stopping at regular intervals. So if you have any questions, you can, ask at that moment so that we do not get interrupted with the flow. Okay. So quality in additive manufacturing. So when we say quality in additive manufacturing, we get a CAD model from customers. Then we analyze it. Can it be manufactured in AM or not? Let me just give me one example before going to that. So let us assume this is my build plate, and I have a part something like this. Okay. So this is my part. And we are building layer by layer, layer by layer, layer by layer. So when we come up to here, we should not be having much of a problem. But when we start going from here, the overhang starts increasing. So when the recorder would be moving in this direction, there is a possibility that the recorder will collide and try to lift off the component, because the contact area is very less. So in order to avoid this, what we generally do is we provide a support somewhere around here, so that we provide more rigid grip to the component. Then again, we may provide support somewhere around here to avoid the overhanging. Similarly, let us assume my part is something like this. So this is my part. So in this part, when I'm printing layer by layer, layer by layer, layer by layer, when I'm coming to here, this layer is starting in air, right? Which is not possible. So I would have to provide support somewhere around here, so that that layer will not be starting in air. Sorry, it should be different cross section. And I might have to provide support somewhere around here. So depending upon the part profile and geometry, we might have to provide additional supports. Or say, for example, customer says he needs a surface finish of say 0.8 here. So in AM, I would be getting finish like 5 to anywhere between 5 to 10. So getting 0.8 surface finish here is not possible. So what would I do? I would just provide some stock here. Then I machine it within 0.8 surface finish, and submit the part to customer. So depending upon the part geometry, profile, and customer requirements, we may decide to add few supports, or add to few stock, or do some changes to the geometry, so that we can print the part in our machine. So we analyze, can it be manufactured in AM or not? If yes, what are the modifications we have to do? So like I said, we would be adding material somewhere, we would be adding supports, so we will be able to manufacture it. So we will be orienting and several other considerations, like how precisely we should slice the model, what kind of surface finish is expected, what precautions we need to take and other parameters to be considered, so that we get the part quality as good as possible. Necessarily all additive manufactured parts are followed by some degree of post processing, and in some parts you have very exhaustive amount of post processing. It would be very rare that we do wire cut or chip off the part from build plate, do some kind of short blasting and send it to customer. Only in very few occasions it has happened like that. But in most of the cases, it will be very elaborate post processing and lot of NDT and then final shipping of part to customer. The entire cycle, the quality of part which customer expects us to deliver has several angles to it. One is powder and its management. Second is printing. And third is post-processing. Post-processing onwards, documentation, final inspection, and others come under traditional and conventional routes. So I will be focusing more on build quality, powder management, and related issues. So that will be the crux of quality control in additive manufacturing. So the first thing is unique raw material. In traditional processes, once you get a billet or forging, you always get a material test certificate, which is MTC, which will give the heat number and all other details, which can be traced back to the part quality that mill supplier assures you. Here, that MTC is not there. That is the first thing missing. How to qualify the powder, and what all precautions we take when we say the build quality is good, above average, or beyond the expected value of the machine provider. So we come to the details, focusing here in raw material and about build quality. Because if you think to the process, the raw material which is powder and which is being laser centered and build process, which sometimes which very much different from traditional conventional manufacturing process. In conventional manufacturing processes, you invert a billet or rod, and then you do machining processes, turn it, do variety of CNC machining to finish the final good. But here you invert the powder, and you have to ensure that powder is of right quality and quantity. Every time part is freshly built, right? So who ensures quality? How do you assure that the part which is coming from a particular build will have the UTS values as specified by the supplier of the machine? So all these questions keep popping up in customer minds from time to time. Raw material uniqueness is also defined by operator hazard or fire hazard. Yes, that is also possible. Then there is raw material deterioration. So how do we store the raw material so that we do not see the deterioration or ONH pickup? Then you have raw material contamination. See, for example, you get a billet or a slab. It is no way possible that you can mix up two incoming raw materials and have a cross contamination. That's not possible, right? But when it comes to very fine powder particles less than 63 microns, and you're using, say, common machine, and you're not cleaning the machine and accessories properly, then you have every chance you will be mixing up and contaminating one powder with another. And if that happens, basically you're creating a powder which cannot be used for subsequent builds, and these powders are pretty costly. Just to give you a reference, a SS steel, which you may buy it from 220 to 220 rupees a kg. Similar type of SS powder, you have to pay almost 10 to 15 times higher price for powder per kg. So powder should not be anywhere be wasted. Just let me play this video. So once when the one layer is built, our build platform goes down by predefined layer thickness. After it goes down by predefined layer thickness, the recoater goes towards the dispenser side, collects the powder and spreads it onto the bread. So it collects the powder and it will spread it onto the bread. Now again laser centering starts. So gradually sorry. So this is how the laser centering happens gradually. So one thing that I want you to remember is whatever you can see here, this everything is a component. And these whatever you can see cylindricals and squares, these are coupons. We will say why we are printing coupons along with the part in later on slides. You just need to remember that we print coupons along with the part. Now it is just covering the contours of the profile. Outside contours, it is just centering. So once when the layer is completed, immediately it will go down by predefined layer thickness. And once again, recoater goes and fills the part. So this is how it happens. So let us say for example, my component is of this height. Okay. This is my component. I'm binding layer by layer, layer by layer, layer by layer, layer by layer. So when I come to this layer, my component will be something like this. And my build chamber would be something like this. So all this cross section would be filled by powder. You can see, right? Only this is the component. Rest everything what you can see here is powder, layer by layer by layer by layer by layer. So this everything would be filled by component. So for printing, say for example, 10 kgs of component, I need not just 10 kgs. I need the volume equivalent to the full height of my build chamber. So for printing 10 kgs, I would be putting something like 50 kgs of powder inside the machine. So now that you have understood this, let us continue with our slide. So if you go through the process, the build process, if we need like 10 kg of component, we are putting in some 50 kgs to cover the complete height. Now after build is over, some 10 kgs of part is removed in the form of some 10 kgs of part is removed and some additional 10 kgs get wasted in the form of supports, wastage on the machine, powder wastage during cleaning. So we will be left out with some 20 kgs powder in the dispenser and some 10 kgs powder in the collector. This is already exposed powder, right? So we need to do the filtration so that we remove all the particulates from them. So out of 30 kgs after doing IPCM, so we basically recover like 28 kgs of powder. Now this powder is recovered and it can be reused. But there is one more angle to it. When you're doing all this filtration process, you're exposing it to the atmosphere, where some of the powder can pick up ONH. It may not be all that apparent in the very first go, but think about the same powder getting repeated for 10 to 15 times. Then you have every opportunity of ONH pickup in this process. And it becomes a powder which has a quality issue, in the sense, if there is more ONH pickup, then the properties that you will be getting from the build are different, and your tensile and fatigue properties, they start deteriorating very fast if you are reusing the powder without checking the ONH levels. So you have to reuse the powder because it is costly. At the same time, you have to worry about it, so that it do not get too much exposed to the atmosphere, and basically you lose the quality of the powder, and you really cannot use it for any meaningful builds. So these are the challenges. I will show you, to counter these kind of things, what controls we do in process. We will start, we will stick to the unique RM. So you might be thinking, why can't we have a dedicated machine for each material? Let me give our own example. So we have like 3 machines in our facility, and we operate like 13 materials. So having a dedicated machine for every material is practically not possible. So we have to use different materials on a same machine. We usually get a material safety data sheet along with powder. What you can see here is ALSA 10 mg powder procured from LPW. Now, once you get the material, you need to look into the safety data sheet, and always the material provider will share you MSDS along with the other test reports. How safety data sheet is important is, certain powders are fire hazard. 2 of them are titanium alloy and aluminum alloy. These are type D type of fire, which cannot be extinguished by ordinary fire extinguisher. We need to have a type D type of extinguisher to take out metal fire or metallic fires. If you look at LPW, ALSA 10 mg MSD, they are very clear that there is a possibility of catching fire. What you should not be using is water, CO2, foam, or ABC powder. Powder handling is done generally at these following places: receiving inspection, issue of raw material, during sieving and filtration, and filters. Generally, filters are filled with powders and particulates, so they have a high risk of catching fire. They can be, real culprits. So you need to be absolutely careful about how you are disposing them and how you are storing them in, scrap yards. So this is the MSDS of Inconel 718 powder. If you look in it, the safety data sheets related to health, this powder is little carcinogenic in nature. There are some issues when the powder is directly coming into contact with eyes or when you inhale it. Material provided will tell you what to look out for and how to take care of those issues. MSDS also provides what is the immediate action to be taken in case the powder has touched your eyes or you have inhaled your powder while cleaning. So considering all these changes, considering all these inputs from MSDS, we take controls like anyone entering the build area must always wear nose mask and safety goggles, especially while performing the cleaning. So while performing the cleaning, they wear a full suit, for doing cleaning. So MSDS also provides first aid measures. Like you can see here, they define what are the first aid measures to be taken in case if you come into contact in your eyes or you inhale them by mistake. So initially, when we started way back in 2013, 2014, we used to get powders from our suppliers, and we used to receive them in folded hands and never asked them what is the quality that you're delivering. Whatever is delivered, we try to manufacture with that. Over so many years, we have learned what is it we should be looking for and what is the things we should be asking our suppliers. Mind you, all our suppliers are OEM suppliers and they are located outside of India. So talking to them needs a lot of understanding what we don't want and what we want. Make sure that that we are communicating this when we are issuing the query itself. We specifically say what is the chemistry required, what are the different tests required. So we flow down all these requirements. So we have every right to reject the powder if the requirements are not met. Every right to reject the powder if the requirements are not met. So I will be showing you what we do typically for powders. So nowadays we are very clear about what are the different tests he has to follow: chemical composition, flowability, apparent density, particle size distribution, morphology. So what are the different standards he has to follow? So we clearly define for which test, which standard he has to follow. We also define what is the morphology we are looking for. We also define what are the defects which are not acceptable in morphology. So we are very clear about what we want, and we are flowing down these requirements to the suppliers. Even after defining all the controls and flowing down to the supplier, still we notice that we come across few issues during receiving inspection. So I will be showing you some typical examples so that you can understand what sort of issues we can come across during receiving inspection. So this is a typical example, powder mismatch. Say we have ordered some 20 boxes of ALS at 10 mg powder. So when we received the powder, we noticed that it is 20 kgs. All the boxes are weighing 20 kgs. However, when we open the powder, 14 boxes are fully filled. If you look at here, 14 boxes are fully filled and 6 boxes are half filled. But when you weigh them, both of them show 20 kgs, 20 kgs. So with this, we were sure that what we have received some other material instead of ALS at 10 mg. Then we need to be very careful when we, especially during receiving inspection. If you look at the label, even label says it is ALS at 10 mg. So we can't blindly rely on suppliers. We need to check the weight as well as open the seal and visually check and ensure that it is meeting as per our, all look same and it meets the requirement. And then second comes particle size variation. So generally speaking, any data will be normally distributed. If you look at this particular lot, 49% is at the lower limit, less than 45 microns, and 53% is at the upper limit. 42% is lying here and 49% is lying here. In middle, there is very less material. So there is an abnormality in this powder. Generally, data will be normally distributed. So most of the values will be laying towards mean and very little will be laying towards a lower and upper specification limit. Here, this is very drastic variation in the powder. Then comes less quantity received. Like I said earlier, we need to weigh all the boxes. Let us assume your box shows 19.9 instead of 20. You might think 0.1 is not a problem, but 0.1 into 20 boxes, it becomes a very, like I said earlier, powder is very costly. So we cannot, compromise even for that 0.1. Then comes microscopy. If you look at here, this is how we expect the powder particles to be, spherical in shape. But if you look at the powder in this lot, some are having satellite structure, some are irregular shape, some are elongated. So these are different type of issues that arise in morphology. The problem here is, let us assume we have a elongated particle. So let us assume when we are melting, this end of particle gets melted and this will be projecting, on the outer surface of the part, which will be, affecting our surface finish or other type of effects. Then issues related to data cards. Like I said earlier, we clearly defined what are the different tests he has to do and what are the different standards he has to follow for doing those tests. Sometimes we observe that in data cards, some tests are not being performed, or some tests are not reported, or some evidences are not provided. So we observe those sort of issues. So we need to see that we're issuing all the data cards. Sometimes we don't receive the MSDS. Like I said earlier, MSDS is very much important. We need to receive the COC as well as MSDS from the supplier. So let us take one typical example. Let us assume you want to print a T structure, something like this, T structure. A T structure like this. You can print in n number of ways. Let us say, for example, you can print in this way by providing all supports here. This is one way of printing. You can print in this way. Say, for example, if your angle is greater than 45, you need not provide a support for this. If your angle is less than 45, you might need to provide a support somewhere around here so that we can print it without any build failure. So in order to increase the angle, you're providing extension here and printing it. This is another way of printing where you can put the T in an incline and provide a support here. You can print even in this way. You can provide additional stock here and print even in this way. Or you can provide some profile here so that the exposure area is less. Here the exposure area is more because this full area is getting exposure. Don't just look at this because you will be printing more parts along with this, right? So here you are increasing the exposure area. Here also you are increasing the exposure area. Here you are increasing the exposure area. But if you look at here, because there is gaps in between, the exposure area is kind of less compared to this. So a part can be print any type of variation and in any type of with any type of supports. You just need to see which is best suited so that you can print more parts, so that you won't have more distortion, and you take care of all the aspects. So every build process is unique, right? So how do we ensure uniformity in outcome? Over a period of time, due to experience, we have come across, we have realized that we can build in quality during the design stage itself to avoid any pitfalls later on. There are two angles to it. First is the past experience. We have realized we need to control parameters like orientation. Can we orient it in a way that it does not sit perpendicular to the recoater? Like I showed earlier, my recoater would be moving in this direction. So I need to see that it is not sitting perpendicular to the recoater. I can tilt in an angle. You can see this, right? It's not perpendicular. He has tilted it in an angle. You need to see that. Can you tilt in an angle in this way, or can you put it in some other orientation so that it does not come perpendicular to the recoater? If it is perpendicular to the recoater, there is a possibility that it will try to lift off the component from the already built layer. Then comes support type. We need to think aspect like, can we use soft support so that we can chip up the support easily and reduce the post-processing activities involved. To remove the supports, we need to remove the supports. We will be doing machining, which will be employing to the cost for machining. So we need to keep these things in mind when designing and finalizing the build. creating additional supports or placing the parts fully. Like I said earlier, you can fill the build plate with parts fully. What will happen? Then area of exposure would increase. When area of exposure increases, there is possibility that you will get more warpage and more distortion. So you need to be very cautious about how many parts you are placing and what is the distance you are maintaining between each part. So if you do that, you will get heavy distortion or warpages and undesirable effects like cracks and delamination. Let me give you one example. We had a propeller part where blade was planned to be finished in as-built condition itself. So to avoid any distortion, we provided additional supports so that we do not get much distortion onto the blade. So in order to remove the supports, we had to do machining. This resulted in distortion on the blade profile after machining. As the stock was high, we ended up with the same issue for which we have provided support to avoid. So we need to be very cautious about where we are adding additional material and how much stock we are adding. Then comes build simulation. Up to 80% confidence interval, we can predict in simulation how much amount of distortion is expected and where stresses are more during build. We have specialized softwares for that. Depending on the simulation results, we can add stock or create less stock so that we will not reject the part due to more warpage or reject the part due to less stock and more warpage. So the next parameter that you need to be looking here is build quality. In build quality, machine health. In machine health, the first thing that we need to take care is laser power. We need to measure the laser power and confirm when the machine says 300 watts laser power, is it really 300 or is there any variation? Once we observe that laser power has dropped to 380, if it would have been any other material of the part, we would have accepted the part. But as it was ALS at NMG, the power was not adequate to melt the powder and the part ended up in rejection. So we need to monitor laser power at regular intervals. Then comes AMC. It is advisable to have AMC, means annual maintenance contract. So it is advisable to have AMC with OEM as excuse me, as this is not like normal conventional machines and has several parts that has to be monitored at regular intervals and replaced at regular intervals. This is to prevent the machine from any unplanned breakdown due to some spare has not been replaced on time. You should be aware by now that it takes like 20 hours to 20 days to print a part, depending on the part complexity, layer thickness, and part height. Say, for example, after running the machine for 20 days, if you ended up with machine breakdown and then customer delivery will get affected, part will get rejected, order will get missed, machine hours that were spent for building the parts will get wasted. It becomes a very costly affair. Then comes machine qualification. This will help us to understand, is the machine consistent in producing the parts with same properties as it used to produce at the beginning of its life. What we are basically doing here is we are just checking, is the machine in good working condition or is the performance getting deteriorated over a period of time. So what we generally do here is we print coupons, few in horizontal, few in vertical, few in inclined, and do heat treatment and ultimate tensile stress and compare them with the results which were attained when the machine was brand new. If we observe any variation, we will inform to the OEM machine supplier to check and address the issue. So once again, the AMC becomes very crucial here for these machines. Then comes operator qualification. This becomes very important as there are judgments that he has to take, like, is the build plate properly loaded? Is it properly dialed? Is the powder spread adequate? Is it uniformly spread throughout the build plate? Is the recorder properly cleaned? Or this might lead to line marks on the actual part when recorder is moving along the build plate. Then ensure no particulates are present on the build chamber walls. Like I said earlier, improper cleaning of the machines will result in cross-contamination and very quickly deteriorate the powder quality. So operator has to be very alert if there are any rubbing sounds or vibrations observed during the running of the machine. Then one more is melt pool monitoring. So EOS has inbuilt capacity in machines. It has a photodiodes that capture the emitted light of the laser sintering process. This allows to monitor the melt pool area during build process itself. This generates a density image to form a 3D part. Powder spread. Let me just give one example so that you understand this better. So this is my build plate. So I'm just exaggerating things so that you will understand the concept better. Let us assume my build plate is somewhat concave or convex. Let us assume it is concave. So when my recoater spreads the powder onto the build plate, then what will happen? So powder will get filled here. And there will not be powder left out here for the component, to melt here. So operator has to observe carefully, is the powder spread properly? At least for the first layer. From there, later on, the machine ensures the layer thickness. At least for the initial layer, the operator has to ensure that there is no this sort of gaps on the build plate and powder is properly spread. In this case, when the recoater moves in this way, so powder would be filled here, and there will be no powder to melt here. So operator has to observe carefully whether powder is properly spread onto the build plate, especially for the first layer. From there on, the machine ensures it. For the first layer, operator has to ensure it. So operator's observation becomes very keen here. Okay, let us continue. So build observation, like how is the powder spread? Is it uniformly spread on the build platform, or there are any unfill observed? If not ensured properly, then there is no powder to melt for the laser at some points, like I shown earlier. If any recoater rubbing observed, speed has to be controlled. If there are any interruptions or stoppages due to any errors, so whether build to be continued, if it is immediately started within certain time, the part can be saved, or build has to be avoided. Such decisions has to be taken from time to time by the operator itself. Upon certain time, if the build is restarted, there is a possibility that you will be getting a step marks. If the step marks are acceptable and can be removed, then he can proceed with the actual build. So there are few decisions which he has to take very quickly, so that it will not affect the actual part quality. Then particulates, like I told earlier, if there are any particulates which are stuck to the recoater, So when the recoater, moves from right to left for spreading the powder, there's a possibility that these particulates will be, rubbing on the already printed part and provide some line marks or step marks and unnecessary defects onto the already printed surface. Then comes proof of the build. Proof of the build quality is something like customers that are generally concerned. They would be like, I do not know, your build plate looks all right, but how do you ensure quality? Many times they say, have the test coupons, have multiple test coupons, have them in different directions, have them in different orientations. Some may be horizontal, some may be vertical, some may be inclined in 45 degrees angle, and some square coupons to take, to actually test the density and hardness of the parts that have been printed from that build. Then they also tell us to check the fill was proper and all the requirements. So all these requirements come from the customer end. They want to be sure that, so many of the customers ask, while you are building the part, build the coupons along with the part. You have seen the earlier video, right, where we have built the coupons along with the part. So some customers ask, build the coupons along with the part, so that I am sure that same types of properties are retained. They do not want separate build for test coupons. Some they do not want separate build for test coupons and separate build for parts. Some say, okay, you establish the parameters onto the build coupons and then use the same frozen parameters and run them on the actual part. So some customers are okay with it. So there are few more customers. They ask for, why don't you print dummy parts? Dummy parts in the sense, in the same build, we print a dummy part, which is very much similar to a part, but not complete height. So from this part, we actually extract the microstructure coupons and tensile coupons, and then we do testings to see whether, part is getting all the properties in that particular orientation as that of the component. So some customers go to that extent as well. For ensuring proof of quality. So there cannot be any more questions beyond this. Either you pass or you fail. In most of the cases, if things are done properly, there is no reason for failing. So this is very exhaustive process flow, as this is a airworthy part for one of our aerospace customers. This is the airworthy part. Just see what we are doing here. 1 coupon plus 2, 3 coupons plus 6, 9 coupons plus 6, 15 coupons plus 1, 16 coupons plus 6. We are printing 22 coupons here. H means horizontal, V means vertical, I means inclined. So 6 horizontal coupons, 6 vertical coupons, 6 inclined coupons, and we have built square coupons for hardness testing, 1 square coupon for chemical composition testing, 1 square coupon for grain structure analysis, microstructure analysis. So this is very exhaustive. What you can see here is very exhaustive because this is an airworthy part. You can just go through the process flow diagram. I'm giving you a few minutes. You just go through the process flow. See, we are doing NDT also here. FPI and radiography. We are doing milling here, CNC milling here. We are doing CNC turning here. We are doing CNC turning here. So in this, chemical composition was tested at powder level as well as specimen level. Then tensile tests have been performed on the coupons in as-built condition as well as after solution treatment and aging condition. Then structure rupture test was also performed on this part, which was a special requirement from customer. Then we performed microstructure analysis, we performed chemical composition, we also did NDT test on these parts. We did radiography and fluorescent penetrant inspection. Then comes powder management. In powder management, first incoming powder inspection, then powder traceability, then powder reusability, then prevention of powder contamination, and powder handling. These are the things that would be covered in powder management. First, incoming of powder inspection. So, like I said earlier, suppliers will provide us the certificate of conformance and MSDS along with the dispatched powder. So, first, when we look at the COC, we compare this with our flow down. We see that has he done all the test that has been called out in the flow down? Has he used the same standard as called out in the flow down? All the results, are there within the acceptance criteria and within the acceptance limit? Once if the COC is okay, then we take the select the samples from the powder. Then we do all the tests that we have asked for in-house as well. If we don't have in-house facility, we will outsource and get those tests done. What you can see on the left hand side is the certificate of conformance test given by the supplier. What you can see on the right is the chemical composition results which we have done from outside vendor, and we compare both the results. So the reason behind this is powder is the key aspect of the additive manufacturing, which defines all my medical all my properties. All these are dependent on powder. This is the key input for me. If I am controlling my key input, like I told earlier, for special process, you need to have control in the input so that you can have control on the output. Because powder is the key input for me, we control it in the receiving inspection stage itself. After getting all the reports and all the tests done, we correlate both the results, both are matching, and both are within the acceptance limit. Only then we accept the powder. Till then, the powder is put in quarantine area. Only after powder is accepted, then we issue the powder to store saying that this is ready to use powder. So these are the different tests that we do. PSD or particle size distribution. So in this, we check how is the powder distribution. As we know, if we ask for 63 microns powder, every particle may not be 63 micron. It may fall anywhere between 45 to 75 microns. The distribution is calculated by sieving the powder and weighing them and deriving the proportion from those particle size. Then comes flow rate. In this, we let the powder to flow from a known predefined cylinder and see the time it takes to pass through it. It is so this determines how powder will be spread during the build. Then comes apparent density. In apparent density, we check the density of the known volume of powder and derive the apparent density. This determines my mechanical properties that can be attained. Then comes tap density. In this, we tap it for a predefined times and then check the density. We continue this activity till we see there is no more change in density even after increasing the taps. Then we measure the density and decide whether the powder is accepted or not. This parameter governs the mechanical properties of the part. Then we do ONH analysis. So we check in powder what is the ONH levels. It is required to monitor the ONH levels because these define the mechanical properties. Then microstructure analysis. We do microstructure analysis for the coupons which have been printed from the specimens. Then we do tensile test of coupons which have been printed from this powder. Then we do hardness testing also from the hardness testing on the coupon which have been printed by using that powder. Then this is the microscopy morphology images seen by SEM, which is scanning electron microscopy. So once after all of these are done and all these are meeting the requirements, then we accept the powder. Then comes powder storage and traceability. Like I told earlier, there are some powders which are highly flammable. So we put them into this inflammable cupboards. These cupboards do not catch fire. So these are fire resistant type of cupboards. So we store all the powder boxes in this inflammable cupboards. Then in order to ensure traceability, what we do is when we get the powder boxes, as you can see here, we provide the numbers on each box. Say, for example, we got ALS at NMG powder from LPW. We name it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, depending on number of boxes. If, for example, a new lot is received tomorrow, it will continue from there. Say, for example, yesterday it was 1 to 10. So today's lot will be 11 to, depending on the end number. So we ensure that every box will have its own unique tracking. The reason behind this is we use something called visual powder management system. Basically, there would be a sticker on this box. By looking at the sticker, I can say what is this powder material, who is the supplier, what is the lot number, how many times this particular powder which is in this box has been used. So we put a reuse sticker. After, by looking at the box, I can see if there are 4 reuse stickers, this has been used 4 times. If there are 6 reuse stickers, this has been used 6 times. So we maintain a visual powder management system. We also maintain an internal tracker. The reason being, say for example, this particular powder has been used for some 10 reuses. After 10 reuses, this box may get scrapped because there is no more powder in this. So that we do not lose a track of how many times a particular powder has been reused, we maintain a tracker as well parallelly. So I can refer box or I can refer tracker and say how many times a particular box has been used. Then comes powder reuse and mixing rules. So, like I said earlier, for printing of 10 kg powder, we would be putting around 50 kgs, right? So it is not always possible for me to have virgin powder, or so in order to ensure that we are ensuring the powder quality, we have classified them into 3 different categories. The first category, what we call is category 1, where we have used powder from 0 to 5 times. So after 5th reuse, we do powder characterization, which means I do particle size distribution, we do flow rate, and we do tap density to just see whether powder is within the acceptance limit. If second category, if the powder has been used from 6 to 10 times, after 10th reuse, we do powder characterization, which means all these tests plus chemical composition. Then category 3, which has been used from 11 to 15 times. After 15th reuse, we check powder characterization, which means all these tests, then chemical composition. We print coupons as well and check how are the tensile properties and all other stress structure properties. So like I said earlier, I might have to mix. So every time I may not have exact amount of quantity required in category 1 itself. Sometimes I might have to mix category 2 with category 1. So in such cases, we have defined our own mixing ratios. There is no any hard call out in any standard. This is what we have developed based on our experience. There is no any hard call out standard for this. So we have derived these general mixing ratios. Generally, the new lot will be more, old lot will be less. That's what is the concept that we're applying here. So the less used lot will be more, and more used lot will be less. That's what we are trying to do here. Then comes powder sieving. So there are two ways of powder sieving. One is manual sieving, other is automated sieving. So we have three automated sievings with us. So what we generally do is we have identified three materials which are fast moving, like Inconel 718, ALS8 NMG, and TI64. For these through, we have dedicated IPCMs, means dedicated automated cleaning equipments. For all other materials, we do manual sieving. So in manual sieving, what we do is we put a sieve here in this area. Then we spread the powder. We push the powder onto the sieve, and we just sieve it with the help of a sieve. It is very much like a for making chapati. You do this atta sieving, right? It will be very similar concept. You just pour the powder onto the sieve, and you just use the scoop to segregate the particles. With the unwanted particles will be left out on the sieve, and the powder particles which are acceptable would be passing through the sieve, basically. So this is manual sieving. In automated sieving, what you can see here is an automated sieve. It is very much like a vacuum cleaner. When you just put it onto the powder and turn on it, it automatically absorbs the powder and it will fill into the container. So we have two containers here. One container marked with red, which is unsieved container, and one container taped with green. This is sieved container. So we have dedicated containers for each materials. Here, if you can see, ALS8 NMG. I told, right, for few materials we have dedicated containers. So this is for ALS8 NMG. So this container is for ALS8 NMG, and this container is for ALS8 NMG. So we have few more containers like this. So what it will do, this container would be loaded on the top. So all this powder from the machine will be captured into the unsieved container. Once when this is done, this container will be loaded onto this, and when it is turned on, here sieving will happen, and this green container would be kept at the bottom. Here sieving will happen, and it will get captured into the green container. Then from green container, we will transfer it into the powder boxes. So here it happens automated. It is very much like a vacuum cleaner. You just need to put it and it will automatically absorb, and it will store it into the sieving container. We also use something called wet separator. One thing that we need to keep in mind is anything that goes into IPCM can be reused. Anything that goes into wet separator would get scrapped. So we need to be very cautious about when you are using wet separator. After all the cleaning is done, only in the areas where we are unable to clean with the help of IPCM, then we go for wet separator. So whatever goes into wet separator is a scrap. I mean, the powder that goes into wet separator will get scrapped. So we need to be very cautious about when to use a wet separator. Then comes printing. So in printing, we need to look at 4 different aspects. One is platform, another is the recoater, visual inspection, and scanning. In platform, we need to look like, are there any cracks? If there are any cracks, this would create unnecessary issues on the part. Then is there so after doing program preparation, file preparation in a software called Magix, which we use for printing. So Magix software will tell us what is the minimum thickness required in order to absorb these temperature and whatever stresses will get generated. So it will tell us what is the minimum thickness required. Based on this, we will decide the thickness. Then comes flatness. Just give me a minute. If you just look at this, we have an adjustment here. Say, for example, I'm just exaggerating things. My build plate is not parallel. Okay, it is something like this. So we have an option. We can use. So this will be fixed. This will lift up in this side. Then front side will be fixed, and the rear side can lift up. With the help of X and Y, you can just adjust. So even if it is not parallel, with the help of this adjustment, it should not be a problem. I can make the build plate sit like this, something like this. I can lift this up, and make the build plate. Just give me a second. I can lift it up and make the build plate sit something like this. Even if it is not parallel, I can just lift the lift this bed and make it sit parallel like this, and I can do the printing. Let us come to our slide. Flatness. If it is not flat, if it is concave or convex, like I showed earlier, we cannot do anything, right? If it is taper, I can lift this height and I can do something. But if it is not flat, I won't be able to do anything. If it is, generally we say if it is within 50 microns, flatness, we accept it. If it is greater than 50, we give it for rework basically. We cannot use that build plate for printing. So this is what you need to keep in mind. Parallelism is not an issue because we can adjust even if the build plate is not parallel. But if it's not flat, then we cannot do any adjustment there. So flatness is important for us in build plate. Not much worried about parallelism. Okay. Then comes visual inspection after build. So we need to visually look how is there any support failure? Is there any delamination? Is there any feature shift? Like I said earlier, step mass or something like that. Is there any feature shift? Then comes recoater. We need to see like, are there any edge damages? Is the recoater straight? We just put it on a fat blade. On this we put a recoater and we just pass a feeler gauge and see that if there is any gap observed. If there is no gap, then it is straight, no issues. If there are any particles, if there are any particles, excuse me. If there are any particles sticking on the recoater, again, it can cause any line marks on the, when the during melting while solidification, the part will be at very hot temperature. If there is any particle sticking on the recoater, then there is very possible that it can cause a line mark or step mark onto the actual part during build. So we need to see that no particles are there sticking onto the edges of the recoater. Then comes scanning of the part. So there are two cases here. Say for example, if we get a drawing, customer provides us a drawing, we do inspection as per drawing and provide an inspection report. If customer provides us a model and doesn't provide a drawing, then we have a Fero scan. So we do the scanning of the component as per Fero. We compare the scan with the model, do color plotting with where how much amount of variation is there, do color plotting and share the reports to customer. Two cases: if there is a drawing, we do inspection as per drawing, we share it to our customers. If there is no drawing, if there is only model, then we do inspection as per model and we share it to customer. Deformation, this can generally seen by amount of distortion. If there is more variation, we can see more variation in the scan results. Delamination. When the residual stresses exceed the tensile strength of printed material, this sort of delamination or heavy warpage or distortion will occur onto the parts. This is delamination. This is cracking. If the energy source is too strong, then stresses will occur during solidification process, resulting in cracking. If it is lift up from build plate, it is delamination. See, our build plate is here. Lift off didn't happen here. It is happening somewhere around here. So this is cracking. If it happens here, it is delamination. You see here, right? It is happening at the intersection of our actual part with the build plate. So this is delamination. Here it is not happening. It is happening on the part after a certain amount of layer during solidification. So this is cracking. This is the difference between delamination and cracking. Then comes warpage. If thermal stresses generated during process exceeds the strength of the material, the part width, then build plate will undergo warpage. Like I told earlier, if you fill in the build plate with all the more number of parts, then there will be more exposure area on the build plate, and there is a high chance that you will get a warpage in this way. Can you see how the build plate has got warped? Then baling effect. Due to lack of weldability with the previous layer, let us say, for example, this is my build plate, okay, and laser is moving. If it is moving in correct speed, then it will correctly melt all the powders, and it will give a uniform layer thickness. Let us assume laser is moving very, scan speed is very high, then it will move very fast. Then in that case, what will happen? Certain amount of layer will be melted, certain amount of layer will be melted, certain will not be melted, certain will be melted, certain will not be melted. This is called as baling effect. Here it will be melted, here it won't be melted, here it will be melted, here it won't be melted due to high scan speed. So when the scan speed is high, then this sort of baling effect occurs. See, these are the different geometrical defects that can occur. See, the sharp corners have got damaged here, here, here. The sharp corners have got damaged. Then this contour has not formed properly here and here. Can you see the contour is not formed properly? Then lattice structure has got damaged. So for these sort of things, we always prefer soft recorder. If you don't use soft recorder, if you use a hard recorder, these sort of issues can happen. Then support interface. Here the support is coming and matching with the actual part here. See, it is matching with the actual part. This will be difficult to afterwards cover it. These are the different visual defects that can arise on the component. Then comes post-processing. Wire cut. In wire cut, the what we basically doing here is we are just separating our component from the build plate. That's it. The only purpose of wire cut is to separate our component from the build plate. So these are the different visual defects that can arise while doing surface measurement. If you look at here, see, partially melted particles. I told you, right? If our morphology is something like, like this end of particle will get melted and this side will be left out. See, this is what is happening here. One edge of the particle is melted, another edge is projecting outside. This is called as layering effect or staircasing effect. Like I told earlier, if you look at the model, if you don't do the slicing properly, it may be looking something like square box, square box, square box, square box, something like this. If you look at the model, if you don't do the slicing properly, it will be looking like square box, square box. So these sort of uneven slicing will create this sort of. Can you see here? It looks like layers. See here. This is a very good example. Can you see here how it looks? Like square box, square box, square box. So this is rough surface because there was a support here which has been removed. See, this is also staircase effect. Can you see? Step, 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 step. So while doing slicing of model, we need to take care about these sort of things. So this can result, staircasing effect and all other sort of visual defects, basically. So for this surface enhancement, we might have to do some polishing or some other activities in order to create all this stuff. So generally, when we print the part, we get anywhere between 6 to 10, 12. That is what is our surface finish that we can attain from additive manufacturing. Then comes post-processing. So whatever, if this turning, milling, or whatever post-processing is involved, we do stage drawings and do inspection as per those stage drawings. So these are the different GD&T parameters that we use. Flatness. This will help us to understand, is there any warpage on the top face? I told you, right? If there is any warpage, we'll be able to identify. Just let me do a little bit introduction on these GD&T symbols so that you understand better. So straightness, what it basically does is, if this is my line, it will just check whether it is concave or convex. It will just say, for example, it is something like this. Then it will take the topmost surface, it will take the bottommost surface, and it will say like, this is your flatness. The height from this top to crust to trough is a flatness. This is straightness of a line. If you're talking about flatness, it talks about full surface. If there is a full plane, a line here, line here, line here, line here, full surface together, it checks the flatness, straightness at various distances, and then it will say this is the flatness of this surface. So straightness of a line, flatness is of a surface. Circularity, if you are checking at one location, roundness, everything, then it is circularity. If you are checking throughout the cylinder, then it is cylindricity. One thing that you need to remember is straightness, flatness, circularity, cylindricity. These are independent features. They do not require any datums. You don't need any, nowhere in the drawing you will see straightness with respect to a datum. Straightness is an independent feature. These are form features. All form features are independent features. Flatness is an independent feature. Circularity is an independent feature. Cylindricity is an independent feature. Nowhere you will see this with datums. Orientations, these always have a datum. So when I say angularity, what it basically means is, let us assume our face, our part is something like this. So he would say this is 60-degree angle. Angularity, some 0.2 with respect to datum A. So just a second. This is my datum A, okay. This is my datum A. He would say angularity, some 0.2 or 0.3 with respect to datum A. So what he's basically saying is, the 60-degree should be within the 0.2 acceptance limit, something like this. Like this or like this is acceptable. Perpendicularity is very same, but 90-degree. Same concept. In angularity, it can be any angle, 10, 20, 30, 50, any angle. But in perpendicularity, it is always 90. It is always 90. Parallelism, it is always 180. So, for example, what he would say is parallelism of this face, and this is the datum. So in perpendicularity 90, and in parallelism is almost like 180 degrees, parallel to this face. So orientation always needs a datum. You cannot measure with these parameters without a datum. Then comes location. This basically defines a position. This is my coordinate system, and I have a hole somewhere around here. So this basically defines what is the allowable variation. So if he says 0.2 is my tolerance, it means that from the center, it can fall anywhere between this circle. If you just basically measure and say, what is the shift? Is it within the circle or is it falling outside of the circle? Then comes profile of a line. This concept applies very much single like these features. So if it is If it's basically applicable for curves. If you're checking curve of a single line, then it is profile of a line. If you're checking for full surface, a 3D surface like this, if you're checking only one line, it is profile of a line. If you're checking for full surface, then it is profile of a surface. Circular runout. When you're checking runout, basically you're dialing OD to ID. That's what runout means. If it is dia to dia, it is circular runout. If it is dia to face, it is radial runout. I mean, it is total runout. Let us assume my part is like this. Here is one dia and here is one dia. If you are checking from here to here, it is a radial runout. If you are checking from here to this face or this face, then it is total runout. So now that we have a little bit understanding of this GD&T, so this flatness will help us to understand how much is the warpage observed on the part after build. This cylindricity will help me to understand how is the hole formation. Is it oval? Is there any taper? Or what is the variation in that particular hole? Cylindricity will help us to understand. Parallelism, like I told earlier, if there is warpage, again, we will be able to understand how is the parallelism. So flatness tells of only of the top surface or only of the bottom surface. Parallelism will tell how is it from top to bottom. True position, like I told earlier, are the positions correct? Is there any variation observed in face, or let us say we have a square block like this. This is my datum and this is my datum, for example. So if he says this is 100 mm, is it correctly 100 or is there a variation? This true position will help me to understand that. Then profile of a surface, like I told earlier, every part may not be square or rectangle or this. You may have some curves, you may have some contours, profiles. So profile will help us to understand is the surface, is the contour surface properly built. So these are the different GD&T parameters that we use in quality control of 3D printed part. So with this, we can end our session. If you have any doubts related to whatever we have discussed now, you can very well ask now. Any doubts, or you want to see some slides which you have already seen, you can very well ask now. Hello?
Dear participants, if you have any query, kindly unmute your mic and ask it to the expert. Expert is waiting for your queries. If you have any query, you can unmute your mic and ask it to the expert.
I think no questions there. Then thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shekhar, for giving me this opportunity.
So thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Since the presentation is very detailed and explained the context of the session topic, we didn't get any questions from the participants. And in the chat box, I can see that the presentation about the comments about the presentation, it's very well explained and like that. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much, Sir Adil, sir, for taking so much pain in arranging this session. So
yeah, thank you for giving me this much opportunity.
Session expert got some difficulty in coming through Google Meet. However, we requested as the participant are able to log in only through Google Meet. He made some arrangements and joined the session in Google Meet and presented a very well detailed presentation on the quality of 3D printing components. Thank you very much, sir. On behalf of Murugappa Polytechnic and Department of Mechanical Engineering, so we extend our heartiest thanks to you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. So, dear